I saw her the second the chapel doors swung open, sunlight pouring in behind her like a spotlight. My ex Amber. Same dark hair. Same sharp look. Same instinct for chaos dressed up in confidence. But this time, she wasn't alone. She was holding a little boy. He couldn't have been more than 3. Big eyes. Wild curls. And a scowl like the world had already let him down. He clung to her leg and peeked out, cautious but curious. And God help me, he looked exactly like me. I didn't breathe. Not really. Just stood there in the foyer of the church, tucks hanging off my shoulders like it didn't fit anymore. Everything felt too quiet. Like the air had been sucked out of the building and replaced with something heavier. Her heels clicked on the marble floor as she walked toward me. Calm. Uninvited. Like she belonged. Hey, Ethan, she said, smooth as ever. Don't worry. I won't stay long. But I think he deserves to know if you're his father. And just like that, the floor cracked under me. Because 3 years ago, Amber had walked out of my life without warning. Said she needed to find herself. She packed up a U-Haul, left me with an empty apartment and a half-built life. I never begged her to stay. Not because I didn't love her, but because I was too tired to chase someone who didn't know where she was going. I spent 2 years after that trying to feel whole again. I read books. I ran long miles on cold mornings. I threw myself into work. And then Sophie came along, kind, steady Sophie, and life started to make sense again. We built something quiet and good. The kind of love that didn't need drama to prove itself. So why was Amber standing in front of me now, holding a child who looked like the spitting image of my own baby photos? I barely got a word out before my best man, Jacob, came barreling down the side hallway. He's not the running type. More of a walk-with-purpose guy. But he was breathless. She's here, he said, like I hadn't already seen the bomb in a sundress. Behind me, the music was still playing. The guests were seated. Sophie was probably finishing her makeup, smiling in the mirror, minutes away from walking down the aisle to marry me. And I was standing in a church lobby with the ghost of my past and a little boy who might be my son. I turned to Amber. My voice came out low. Is he mine? She raised her eyebrows. You really want to ask that in front of him? I looked down. The boy Max, she said his name was still watching me. Same eyes. Same posture. Same hesitant tilt of the head I'd had in every school photo from kindergarten to 3rd grade. I didn't get to say anything else. Because right then, Sophie walked in. She was holding her veil, her dress perfect, eyes bright, until they landed on Amber. Then on the boy. Then on me. Her smile dropped. What's going on? She asked. Amber didn't flinch. Just introducing Max to his father. Sophie turned to me slow. Tell me she's lying. And I couldn't. I don't know, I said, the words scraping my throat raw. That was all Sophie needed. She didn't cry. Didn't yell. Just stepped back. I want a paternity test, she said. And I'm not walking down that aisle until we know the truth. She turned and walked away, heels clicking down the corridor that was supposed to lead to forever. And I was left standing between 2 women I once thought I'd build a life with, and a little boy whose existence might change everything. The ceremony was supposed to start in 15 minutes. Instead, it was unraveling before it ever began. You ever feel your whole future balancing on the edge of a manila envelope? That's what the paternity test felt like. 48 hours. That's how long the clinic said it would take. They'd rushed it for us. The lab tech didn't ask questions. I think the look on Sophie's face when she asked for the expedited results said everything. She wasn't angry. She was paused, like someone holding a crystal vase and waiting to see if the cracks were going to spread or if the thing might hold. She moved back in with her sister that night, took her dress, her things, her quiet strength, said she needed time to think, said she didn't want to look at me and wonder if I was already someone else's father before I ever became her husband. And I understood that. I really did. Me? I stayed in the apartment, still half decorated from the wedding that didn't happen. The fridge was full of catered samples. There were name tags and table settings on the kitchen counter. I found the custom cake topper in the junk drawer, wrapped in bubble wrap. It was us, holding hands on a bicycle. Sophie had picked it. Said it was whimsical. Now it felt cruel. The silence was the worst part. Not just in the apartment, but in my head. Because when you're alone, really alone, every mistake you've ever made gets louder. Every word you didn't say echoes like you screamed it. And then there was Max. That little boy haunted me. Because as much as I wanted to shut it all out, I couldn't stop thinking about him. His eyes. The way he looked up at me, like he already knew we were linked somehow. Amber had left town the night of the non-wedding. Said she needed space, too. But she agreed to keep her phone on. She promised she'd bring Max back the second the results came in. I believed her. Not because I trusted her, but because this wasn't about her anymore. It was about him. But 2 days of silence will test even the best parts of a man. I cleaned the apartment top to bottom, rearranged the living room, took down the save-the-date photos we'd tacked on the fridge. I wasn't trying to forget Sophie. I was trying to make space, not for someone new, but for the truth, whatever it ended up being. Then, the night before the results came in, I got a message. Anonymous number. No name. You think the test is your only problem? Amber's lying. Max isn't the reason she came back. Check your email. That was it. No greeting. No explanation. And damn me, I checked. Because even though my brain screamed scam, my gut said otherwise. In my inbox, a single email. No subject. No sender. Inside, a screenshot of an airline receipt. Amber's name. 3.5 years ago. Destination, Atlanta. The date matched almost exactly with the week she left me. Said she was heading west. Said she needed to be alone. But this was the opposite of alone. I didn't know anyone in Atlanta. Neither did she, or so I'd thought. And then came the second email. You think Max is the only thing Amber's hiding? There's more. And it's connected to someone a lot closer than you think. That was all. And suddenly the questions weren't just about a kid or a wedding. They were about secrets buried under years of silence. The next morning, the lab called. The results were ready. I didn't open the email right away. Just stared at the subject line like it might explode. Paternity test results, Max Monroe. I clicked it. Read the one line that mattered. Probability of paternity, 99.98%. He was mine. That one night with Alec? It didn't matter now. The numbers didn't leave room for doubt. Max was mine. I was a father, and I'd missed the first 3 years of his life. But as overwhelming as that was, it wasn't the only thing on my mind. Because now there was something bigger lurking. That flight to Atlanta. That anonymous message. And the fact that Amber had walked back into my life with perfect timing, not just to reveal a child, but right before I said, I do. It didn't feel random. It felt planned. And if it was, then someone was pulling strings behind the curtain. Someone who didn't just want to interrupt my wedding. They wanted to detonate my entire life. When people talk about betrayal, they picture cheating, lies, secrets behind closed doors. But let me tell you something most don't say out loud. The deepest betrayals? They don't come from strangers. They come from family. And I learned that the hard way. It started with a photo. Sophie called me the day after I told her about Max. She didn't say much on the phone, just, I need to see you. I agreed without hesitation. I would have agreed to anything, honestly. I was that desperate to prove I wasn't the man she was afraid I might be. When I got to her sister's house, Sophie didn't even say hello. Just handed me her phone. There it was. An Instagram post. From 3 years ago. A backyard barbecue, plastic cups, string lights, cheap lawn chairs. Amber was in the photo, laughing. And next to her, my older brother, Alec. His arm was around her waist. I stared at it for a long time, waiting for the image to change, to glitch, to be a mistake. It didn't. Sophie whispered, check the tag. I did. At Alec Reynolds. The account was private now, but it hadn't always been. Someone I went to college with followed him back then, Sophie said. They remembered seeing her in photos. Thought I should know. Alec and I hadn't spoken in years. We used to be close. Same childhood bedroom, same backyard scraped knees, same family Christmas photos where we smiled like things weren't broken. But after college, he changed. Started chasing shortcuts. Got mixed up in business schemes that smelled like bad news. When he left town, he said he needed to reset. That was Alec's speak for running. I hadn't heard from him since. But apparently, Amber had. I felt my chest go tight, like my ribs were trying to hold in a scream. Sophie stood there, arms folded, waiting. Not for an excuse. She knew this wasn't my doing, but for the truth. Or at least, a piece of it. You think they were together? She asked quietly. I opened my mouth, closed it, then finally said, I think Amber lied about everything. Sophie nodded once. I'm not walking back down that aisle, Ethan, until I know Max's father is you, and only you. And just like that, she was gone again. I drove straight to Amber's Airbnb. No appointment. No warning. She answered the door in yoga pants and a worn college hoodie. The kind of clothes that used to mean comfort. Now they just made me sick. I didn't wait. I pulled up the photo and held it out. You want to explain this? She blinked. Just once. That was all it took. You and Alec, I said, voice low. Were you together? Amber stepped back like I'd shoved her. It wasn't like that, she said. Don't lie to me. She folded her arms. After we broke up, I flew to Atlanta. I didn't know he was there, not at first. I was crashing with a mutual friend. He showed up at a party. One thing led to another. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I didn't have the strength not to. One thing led to another. You sound like you're describing a movie scene, not 3 years of silence and a child. Her jaw clenched. I didn't plan it, but you went through with it. I didn't think it would last. Alec wasn't stable. I thought maybe. You thought maybe he was a better version of me. She didn't answer that. And then I asked the question I wasn't ready to hear the answer to. Is Max mine or Alec's? Amber looked away. That silence? It was the longest 5 seconds of my life. I think he's yours, she finally said, voice unsteady. Alec and I. It was one night. But I don't know for sure. I never did a test. And that was worse than no. I backed away, hands shaking. You came to my wedding. You looked me in the eye. You told me he deserved to know his father, and you didn't even know who that was. I did it for Max, she snapped. Alec's gone. I froze. Gone. I repeated. She nodded, slower now. Disappeared. 2 months ago. No warning. No note. His apartment's empty. His phone's dead. I waited. I thought he'd resurface. But then you saw the wedding announcement. She didn't deny it. He told me, she whispered, that if anything ever happened to him, to bring Max to you. I stared at her. Why? She hesitated. And then, because he knew Max was yours, she said softly. He never told me how, but I think he had already done a test. Or maybe he just saw it in his eyes. A chill ran through me. Of what? She looked out the window like someone might be watching. I don't know. He said he'd gotten involved in something. Something big. Something he couldn't back out of. I felt like I was falling. This wasn't just about a child. It wasn't even just about an old flame showing up uninvited. This was something else. Alec wasn't just missing. He was hiding. Or worse. And if what Amber said was true, that his last words were about Max, then someone else might already know that child existed. Which meant he wasn't just a paternity test anymore. He was a target. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of Amber. Not even because of Max. But because of Alec. He was the kind of guy who could talk his way out of anything, trouble, responsibility, consequences. But disappearing? That wasn't like him. Even when we were on bad terms, he never went dark. Not completely. So if he vanished, it meant one of two things. He was hiding from someone worse than me. Or someone had shut him up for good. And the worst part? I still didn't know how Max fit into it all. Was he Alec's son? Was he mine? The paternity test said 99.98% probability. I'd clung to that like a life raft. But now I couldn't stop wondering what Alec knew or what he'd done that made him leave a child behind with instructions to come to me if anything happened. He could have told Amber to go to the police, or his old business partner, or disappear completely. But he didn't. He said my name. Bring Max to Ethan. Why? Around 2 a.m., I opened my laptop, pulled up every email Alec had ever sent me, the ones I hadn't deleted. Most were short, cryptic, classic Alec. But one from almost a year ago stuck out. Subject line, do you remember Theo? That name hit like a punch to the ribs. Theo was our cousin. We were thick as thieves growing up, sleepovers, summer bike rides, 4th of July sparklers. When we were kids, we used to swear we'd all live on the same street someday, raise our families like one big backyard tribe. Then Theo died. Car accident. August 19th, 1999. He was 16. We were 17. Alec never got over it. The email just said, thought about him today. Been digging into something. Not sure if it's connected. But if anything ever happens to me, remember this date. August 19th, 99. I hadn't thought about it since. Now I couldn't stop. The next morning, I went back to Amber's rental. I need his laptop, I said. Or phone. Or whatever he left. Amber hesitated. He didn't leave much after he vanished, she said. But a few weeks before he disappeared, he started acting different. Distant. Focused. Like he knew something was coming. She went into the bedroom. Came back with a black duffel bag. Inside was a burner phone, a flash drive, and a worn-out notebook full of half-legible scribbles. He handed me this one night, she said. Told me not to open it unless something happened. I took them all. Back at my apartment, I plugged in the drive. There was a folder. Locked with a password. I tried Alec's birthday. Didn't work. I tried Amber's. Nothing. Then I typed 081999. The folder opened. Inside were scanned PDFs, screenshots, email threads, all with one name popping up over and over again. Charles Ashford. If you grew up where we did, you know that name. Maddox was a real estate mogul. Bought up half the town during the crash. Bulldozed historic neighborhoods and turned them into overpriced condos. Wore tailored suits and smiled like a man who knew the rules didn't apply to him. Alec worked for him. Briefly. Said it was easy money. Then he quit. No explanation. Now, staring at these files, I understood why. Alec had been digging. Safety violations. Bribed inspectors. Fake permits. Ghost companies. There were spreadsheets showing missing funds, hidden shell accounts, entire buildings with structural issues quietly paid off with NDAs. It wasn't just corruption. It was criminal negligence. And then I found the photo. A building, one of Maddox's first projects. Half collapsed after a fire, years ago. The timestamp? August 19th, 1999. The same night Theo died. The pieces snapped together all at once. Alec had never believed the accident was random. Theo had been visiting a friend who lived in that building. There was a fire. They said it was an old fuse box. But now? Now I was staring at a report that said the wiring had failed inspection 3 times, and the reports had been buried. Alec hadn't just been chasing Maddox. He was trying to rewrite history, undo a lie our whole family had been fed for decades. And he was getting too close. One of the last emails on the drive was from Alec to an unknown recipient. I know what you did. I have proof. If anything happens to me, my brother has everything. You'll never bury this. I sat there, shaking. He wasn't wrong. He'd passed it all to me. And now, I was holding a ticking time bomb. That night, I drove to Sophie's. I didn't call ahead. I just needed someone real. She opened the door in pajamas and wet hair. I must have looked like hell. She didn't ask questions. Just said, "Come in." I sat on the edge of her couch, told her everything. Theo, the drive, Maddox, the fire, the paternity test, all of it. She didn't interrupt. Just listened, eyes wide, hands folded in her lap like if she moved too quickly, the truth might collapse. When I finished, I said, "I don't know what to do." She looked at me and said the one thing that made my spine straighten. "You do know. You're just afraid." And she was right. Because Alec didn't just leave me the truth. He left me the responsibility. I used to think the hardest part of life was learning to forgive people. But now I know, it's deciding who to protect when you can't protect everyone. After Sophie said what she said, "You do know. You're just afraid," something clicked. Not like a light bulb. More like a lock. Like something inside me turned, and suddenly, I couldn't go back to the man I was before. I wasn't just a groom without a wedding anymore. I was a father. And Alec's brother. And whether I liked it or not, I was the last man standing with the truth. That night, I emailed everything, every file, every photo, every email thread, to a lawyer a buddy of mine had used when he blew the whistle on a workplace scam. The guy's name was Thomas Gray. Clean record. Former prosecutor. The kind of man who made people nervous just by walking into a room. I sent a note with it. "If anything happens to me, go public. All of it. And protect the boy." Then I printed hard copies. Put them in a fireproof lockbox. Dropped one at Sophie's, one at Amber's. Sophie didn't say anything when I handed it to her. She just nodded. Tighter than usual. But strong. Amber cried. "I didn't mean for any of this," she whispered. I didn't know what Alec was into. I swear. I believed her. Mostly. But belief wasn't my priority anymore. Max was. I saw him that night, really saw him for the first time as my son. Not as a surprise. Not as a burden. But as mine. He was in his pajamas, feet dangling from Amber's couch, holding a toy truck like it was the only stable thing in the world. When I knelt down beside him, he looked at me, big eyes, same shade as mine, and said, "Are you staying this time?" I couldn't answer right away, because my throat locked up. But I nodded. "Yeah, bud," I said. "I'm staying." He smiled. Just barely. And that one smile anchored me more than anything else had in months. The next day, I got a call. Unknown number. Voice was distorted. Mechanical. Like something out of a spy movie. "You've got something that doesn't belong to you." Click. That was it. Didn't say Maddox's name. Didn't need to. I called Thomas. He didn't even blink. "Let them call. We've got documentation. We've got timestamps. If anything happens to you, it'll blow sky high. And they know that." I wanted to believe him. But the next morning, my car was keyed. Every panel. And a note was left under the windshield. Stay buried. Amber wanted to leave town. Said we should go somewhere quiet. Safe. Start fresh. But that's not how this works. You don't run from a fire when the house is already burning. You pull the people out. Sophie came by the apartment 2 nights later. She didn't knock. Just walked in, hair pulled back, wearing one of my old sweatshirts like it was armor. I thought about it, she said. And if you're going to do this, I'm in. I blinked. Sophie, I don't want a life built on fear, she said. Or one where we pretend nothing happened. If this is your fight, then it's mine too. I swear, in that moment, I remembered every reason I asked her to marry me. Not because she made the hard things disappear, but because she stood next to me when they didn't. So we planned. Quietly. Deliberately. We put cameras on the house. Told Max he'd be staying with Sophie's sister for a few days. Just a fun trip. Amber agreed. Reluctantly. But she saw the fear in my eyes. I think she felt it in her bones too. And then I went to Maddox's office. Not to threaten. Not to confront. Just to be seen. His secretary said he was in a meeting. I said I'd wait. I sat in the lobby for 23 minutes. Long enough for every security camera in the building to log my presence. When I left, I nodded at the front desk. Smiled. Because now he knew I wasn't hiding. Now he knew I had something to lose. And I needed him to think I'd fight to the edge for it. Because the truth? I already was. That night, I sat in Max's empty bedroom. Just me and a nightlight shaped like a moon. I stared at the walls Sophie had painted pale blue when we still thought we'd be bringing our child home someday. And for the first time, I realized. It didn't matter how Max got here. He was mine now. Blood or not. Love doesn't check DNA. It just shows up. And I would. Every day. No matter what came next. You ever feel the shift in the air before something breaks? Like the quiet isn't peace, it's pressure? That's how the day started. Still. Cold. Cloudless. The kind of morning that feels like a held breath. 3 weeks had passed since the test came back. Max was officially mine. Maddox knew I had Alec's files. The lawyer had everything backed up. Sophie was by my side. And Max was safe with her sister. But Alec was still missing. And the kind of silence surrounding that man didn't feel accidental. Then came the letter. No return address. Slid under my front door like a ghost in the night. Typed. Simple. Exit now, or you'll end up like your brother. That was the moment I stopped playing defense. I called Thomas. He didn't ask questions. Just said, we go to the press. But I knew better. Maddox had money. He had people. He could spin a story faster than a hurricane. So I did the one thing he wouldn't expect. I called someone who hated him more than I did. Her name was Dana Price. Local journalist. Investigative, sharp, and once nearly bankrupted trying to expose a Maddox-owned slum property that gave half a neighborhood respiratory issues. She answered on the second ring. I said, I've got proof. Of everything. She said, come. I've been waiting for something like this. 5 days later, the story dropped. Front page. Full spread. Behind the smile, Charles Ashford and the collapse of 812 Brookline. Photos. Documents. Quotes from the whistleblower Alec had tracked down. Even the email Alec never got to send me. Printed, word for word. It went viral in less than 12 hours. And Maddox? He made a mistake. He responded. Not with lawyers. Not first. He held a press conference. Said it was a hit piece. Said a disgruntled former employee with a criminal brother was trying to smear his name. That was the first time I'd ever heard Alec referred to in the past tense. But it was all I needed. Because now it was public. And public meant protected. The heat came fast. City inspectors. Federal safety regulators. Even a Senate candidate used the story to push his platform. And 2 days after that, they found Alec. Alive. Bruised. Thin. Locked in a storage unit 2 towns over. A janitor heard banging behind a row of old office furniture. When the cops opened it, Alec stumbled out like a man caught between sleep and survival. He'd been missing for 54 days. And when he saw me, he collapsed into my arms. Didn't cry. Didn't speak. Just held on. Later, in the hospital, he told me the whole story. He'd been getting close. Too close. Maddox's people made a move. He escaped once. Went dark. Tried to wait it out. But they caught him again. Beat him. Threatened Max. And that was it. That was the line. So he told Amber, if I disappear, take him to Ethan. He'll know what to do. He was right. Eventually. Alec's testimony sealed it. Maddox was arrested 6 weeks later on charges of criminal negligence, bribery, unlawful imprisonment, and tampering with federal records. He won't see the outside again. And Max? He'll never know what almost happened, because we won't let that shadow touch him. Sophie and I took it slow after that. No big speeches. No second proposal. Just Sundays. We'd pick Max up, take him to the farmer's market, feed ducks at the pond. She'd hold his hand, and he'd call her Miss Sophie like it was a sacred title. And one day, out of nowhere, he slipped his tiny fingers into both of ours and said, "Can this be forever?" And Sophie smiled, looked at me, and said, "Yeah, buddy, I think it can. It's been a year now." Alex, living clean. Helps with Max, shows up early. Stays late. He's different. Softer. Humbled by a second chance. Amber? She moved out of state. Sends birthday cards. Calls once a month. She's trying, and I won't take that from her. But Max is with me. Always. And Sophie? She never wore the old dress. We gave it away, donated it to a bride who needed a fresh start more than we needed a reminder. But one afternoon, in a quiet courthouse, Sophie wore a navy blue dress. Max wore suspenders. And I wore the same ring I'd planned to give her the first time. Only now, it felt heavier. Not because of the past, but because of everything we carried forward. And that night, when Max fell asleep in the back seat on the way home, Sophie reached across the center console, laced her fingers through mine, and whispered, "This is the life we were meant for." And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was surviving a story. I felt like I was living one. One with a boy who called me dad, a brother who came back, and a woman who chose to stay, even when the music stopped. No secrets. No detours. Just home.